Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session of the Alt Conference. I'm really pleased to welcome Tirumani Nadan and Jim Turner. And I'm really looking forward to this talk. Skip your sleep. It's 1 minute to midnight. I had a moment like that myself last night. I'm sure most of you are in the same position as we're preparing for semester one. So if I'm hoping for some hints and tips of when you get to that midnight stage. I will hand over now to Tirumani and Jim. Thank you very much, and I'll share the screen.
Thank you, Emma, for the intro. So welcome, everyone. I've just posted in the chat. I'm not sure if people are, I think, on the just waiting for it to start, or we have 13 people watching. It would be great to know who is there, who's watching, where you're joining us, your institution, because this is going to be an interactive presentation. So I've got my co-presenter, Jim, with me today. And we're just going to make it a start. Can I have the next slide, please, Emma? Hi, Alex. So today, briefly, we're going, so a quick overview of the presentation. We've got only 30 minutes. We've questioned roughly 25 minutes. It's a deep topic, but we'll try to kind of get into bits and pieces, kind of food for thought to take away from today's presentation. So what we're going to talk about is your input. There'll be a lot of your input in this as part of this presentation today. And we're going to talk about why this piece of work, why Skip Your Sleep, it's 2359, and what is intersectionality, current literature around deadlines, assessment, and cultural understanding. And we're also going to briefly touch upon literature that tells us about deadlines and students, and then intersectionality consideration for assessment before we then provide a question that is going more as a takeaway for you. Can I have the next slide, please, Emma? So hi, Steve. Hi, Rich. Hi. Yeah, Steve said Coventry. So there is a slide, there is a link that Emma is going to put in the chat. I can also do that, actually. Whoever we've got today with us, sorry, can I have the slide before? So we've got a Google Doc, which is open. You can all have access. And I would welcome you all to kind of fill this in for the moment. This will be the first activity of the presentation. And the questions that it basically asks about your institution, your name, role, department, and assessment deadlines, what type of deadlines you've got in your institution. I've got an anonymous cormorant. I didn't even know that was an animal. I've got a camel. I've got a kangaroo. So people out there are looking at the document. If you could please fill that in with pros of those deadlines that you've got in the institution, completely your thoughts, not what your senior management thinks the advantages and disadvantages are, and then the cons. And then you, as learning tech designer, consultant, however you call yourself, the role that you call yourself, what are the challenges for you when you're designing the module online, putting it on VLE management, how you deal with having to put students into group. I'm seeing some slides being filled. Now, can I have the next slide, please, Emma? Now, one thing I didn't tell yet is you've got just 2 minutes to complete this. And there's going to be a reward for the first one to complete the row. I've been very generous. I've just told you the 2 minutes now only. So we've got
deadline.
We've got Ida. Sorry if I've mispronounced your name. We've got someone from UU Academic. Okay. Okay, we've got someone 7 p.m. on Mondays, 23:59. By the way, my stopwatch is running. You can't see it, but it's running. And we've got someone who put 12. I guess that's noon, 5 p.m. Okay, UL. I'm not too sure who's joined us from UL. If you add your name, that would be great. Cons rigid, user focus. I'm going to check the timer. Okay, you're still good. Not yet. I mean, by the time I started it, so we've got somebody who said generally 4 p.m. Senior learning, LSC, University of Warwick. So we've got cheetahs, rhinos, hamsters, camels. I've got a bat. I've got a beaver. Okay, I've got loads of. I still don't know what a cormorant is. I need to Google that at some point in time. Chameleon, I'm familiar with. Hedgehog, otter, hamster, anteater. Yay, let me look at. Okay, you're still doing good on the in terms of timing. Very generous with this stopwatch, seriously. Oh, somebody sent me cormorant facts. Oh, it's a seabird. I feel like just looking at it. Oh, it's pretty. So we've got someone who said generally 4 p.m. and some 23:59. Okay. Yay. Hooray. So time is up. Now, next slide, please. So, by the way, the reward for the first one to have completed it is a big thank you from me. Thank you for submitting it, for completing it on time and within time, and for having done the whole row. Thank you so much. That's very much what we often say to our students, and that's why I'm saying that as well. Thank you. Submission received. Leave bird emblem of Liverpool. Oh, I'm learning a lot about cormorant today. So yeah, thanks Emma for moving to the next slide. Now, what's intersectionality? You know, I could have put a lot of definition around intersectionality. There are so many out there, and Google provides a wealth of information on this. This presentation is not about teaching every aspect of intersectionality. So I will not go deep into this. However, briefly to mention, as you can see on this picture, it's around race, gender, class, history, language. You've got religion, culture, sexuality, education, economic background, which is not quite on this particular picture. And of course, one thing that is often very, very often missed is that all elements also corresponding to your immediate family member affect your position in society. We often tend to say, okay, it's just my gender, it's just my class, it's just my ethnicity, which is true, but also it depends on the ethnicity, class, gender, sexuality, and all of your immediate surrounding as well. And this helps in your understanding. And if I could have the next slide, please, Emma. So this is my definition. You can quote it as long as you say, Tirmani said it. So understanding intersectionality for me, being born in Mauritius was not challenging at the start because I was exposed to ethnicities and classes and genders that are present, sexuality, orientation, and all that were present at that time in Mauritius. However, I think I learned more about it when I came to Europe and got exposed to other cultures and things like this. And to me, in a nutshell, understanding and intersectionality is understanding what I am and what I'm not. If I don't understand, for example, I'm a female, yes, I would not understand everything. I would not be able to walk in the shoes of a male right now, but at least at some point, I need to know that, yes, this is what I don't know, and this is what I'm not, and try to understand it. Not obviously, I will not have a live experience of that. Can I have the next slide, please? Yeah, I'm trying to jiggle. So now, quick question. I've seen in the Google documents, some people are associate professors. We've got academics. We've got learning tech, educational developer. We've got Matt, I'm not too sure which role you are, and we've got senior learning tech. I believe we don't have any students at the moment with us. This slide, I'm just going to ask you if you could put in the chat on YouTube where you're joining. What do deadlines mean to you in your role as professor, senior, LT, simply LT, academic? It would have great if we had somebody who's doing their PhD or postgrad or something like that at the same time doing a part-time degree or something. But we don't. If you could just write in the chat, what do deadlines mean to you personally? Again, not to your institution. You don't have a deadline for that, by the way. But we'll still have to go with the flow because it's a 30 minutes presentation. Sorry, I don't seem to see the comments, so I'm just going to come back to that. Can I have the next? Okay. Elena Dawn says, place from which to begin backward timing to set up workflow. Okay. Do we have some more comments around what do deadlines mean to you? And if you are doing some part-time courses, or even if you're doing online training where, you know, sometimes you've got these courses 2-3 weeks that you've got to do for work, if you can just write about that as a trainee or student on that course. So I guess it's Emma who said, for me, deadlines are both a motivator and a pressure. Rich said, deadlines are something many of our students have no respect for. Okay, I'll leave the comments coming, and I'm going to move to the next slide quickly. Can I have the next one, please? Yeah, so I'll now leave the floor to Jim, who's going to take you through culture of deadlines and what they mean and what current literature says.
Yeah, this work that we're discussing today really comes out of a lot of meetings that the three of us have been doing, where we're trying to find particular answers in the literature, or plan a research project about trying to focus on one aspect of education and see how we can design a research project to try and understand it in a deeper way. And we were talking about assessments generally, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to very quickly go through some of the things we've been discussing in terms of the literature in trying to understand this particular aspect. So next slide, please. So just give like sort of macro overview, and this might sort of link with you in terms of how we think about deadlines in our daily work, rather than just in terms of how it affects students. So I was looking more in the grey literature here, with, you know, looking at the things like Business Insider and Forbes magazine and these sorts of things, where this is where I could only find references to cultures around approaches to working across different cultures using deadlines and the impacts of that. But one thing I don't mind, Emma, could you share that thing that I just dropped in the private chat there? This is a link to a rather interesting little review where in Business Insider, they're talking about the different cultural understandings of time. So this is somebody who's worked, an American who's worked across very, different time zones with different groups of people globally, and starts to discuss what are the different time understandings of that. There's a really nice one. I don't know whether it's apocryphal because I couldn't find the actual example of this, but they talk about in Western views, we view time as we're facing the future and we walk forward into the future. And in this review that I've just put forward there, they talk about the Madagascan point of view, where you walk backwards. Their whole linguistics is around the idea that they're moving backwards into the future, always facing the past. And these are quite interesting different ideas about how we think about time and how culture builds our vision of time and how we might use time to plan it. But sometimes I think, reflecting on some of this literature, I've noticed as well, this has changed my viewpoint on how I think about internal cultures within organizations, about how I start talking to other groups and their understandings of the flexibilities within deadlines. So there's a whole other range of literature which talks about how we set deadlines and where does that come from, and the different ways in which deadlines are managed in different cultures. So one of the interesting ones that comes out is this idea that the most important thing about a deadline is not hitting it, but what remains after it. So the one of the important things that comes from this cultural understanding is that the most important part is that the relationships remain strong and respectful. So you have the importance there is that what you're doing is you're not pushing to get the job done. You're trying to build up that relationship. And I've noticed that, just reflecting on that in my own institution, of how, you set a deadline, you go, why aren't these guys hitting it? And then you go and sit with them and chat about it. And lo and behold, by the end of it, they've gone, oh yeah, there you go. That just finished it for you. So there's a lot of negotiation around these sorts of things. Another one that comes out quite strongly in this grey literature is this idea of hitting the deadline in terms of, and they describe it using the bus analogy. Okay, so again, I don't know whether this is apocryphal or not, but they talk about, well, in Swiss time, for instance, the bus leaves always on time, but in some other cultures, the bus leaves when it's full. And they use this to sort of highlight the significance of quality over this temporality of getting the job done. And this all links together as well with a wider discussion about the impact on creativity, how you want to actually get quality out of this process, but by setting this deadline, the closer you get to it, the less quality that you can produce, because you're squashing this creativity in a shorter space of time. And I'm worried about my time load now. Next slide, please. So what I wanted to talk about here as well is just focus on two of these aspects here. A lot of the literature now, if we think about the impact on students, is procrastination. So there's a huge amount of literature. And if you share this particular one, Emma, for me as well, that I just dropped into the chat. This one's quite an interesting overview, just recently done it. And what it highlights is our viewpoint of procrastination is very much a sociological point of view. No, sorry, a psychological point of view rather than a sociological point of view. There's very little literature that talks about the context of the deadline rather than just what's happening inside the individual as they start to reach that crucial deadline. So there's something really missing about that, and an opportunity to explore this with students, I think. There's also a massive connection between well-being and procrastination. So the emotional side of this is not really explored very well in the literature. It's more the psychological effects are more about personality traits, the usual kind of surveys and these sorts of things to highlight particular personality traits rather than these emotional reactions. So there's a huge opportunity as well of exploring anxiety and its effects, but also causes of procrastination, that it's cyclical, that it's not as you approach that deadline, it could be what's happening as you lead up to it, as much as the cause of it. So there's also this multiple deadlines as well, and you'll see this a lot in the literature. And I think I've forgotten to put this one together. I'll send this one out in a minute, the link to this. But there's a really nice piece of research that's been done by Jones, 2020, in the development of this student minds mental health charter, the university health charter. And they did a really nice sort of development process, interviewing staff and students, and assessment bunching really begins to highlight in that literature and its impact on mental health. And the last little thing here, this liminality and becoming, links back to procrastination as well, and through the topic of mental health, because what you're seeing there is whether we talk about during this lead up to the deadline itself, the journey that the student is taking towards that, and whether we actually build in greater support, where we discuss the emotional impact of coming towards your first deadline and how to deal with some of these things. Just get them out on the table and actually begin to share them and discuss them. And then possibly an opportunity. So next slide, please, Emma. Here's the link now for that Jones article. I'll just drop in the chat. So yes, this various different possible solutions here. UDL, Universal Design for Learning. I don't know whether you're familiar with that, but there's a real richness in the connection of that theory with neurological studies and these sorts of things. It's grown through neurological studies, but it doesn't focus so much on procrastination and deadlines. It's much more focused on assessment, flexibility in the type of assessment that you offer, the format that you give the student. There's some literature around continuous assessment as well, although there is some evidence in there that this continuous assessment is almost like over assessing the students, and they become like overly tired by this performative process all the time. There's some interesting studies about flexible assignments. There's not too many studies, although I haven't done a massive literature review on this, but what does seem to come across there is that the studies it's not truly flexible. What they're talking about is offering 3 or 4 deadlines that the students can pick from. And what they tend to find is that the students are really bad at choosing the optimal deadline for them. So basically what they're saying is they always go for the final deadline out of the 4, and they still haven't planned well enough to hit that deadline. And also that they talk about the fact that, well, we in order to offer this flexibility, we need to help students to become flexible learners, which seems to be like, given even more weight to the problem. One of the interesting couple of examples, though, around the identification of bunching, some really interesting things coming from the TEL community around building systems to make the academics aware and to use kind of systems to identify those deadlines and put them into some kind of order so that the staff is aware of how many deadlines are all happening at the end of the month. But I got really interested in the block delivery. Okay, so I'm going to share a couple of really key little bits of literature here that maybe you'll get your time to have a look at these. I don't know whether you offer block delivery in there, but the first one I've shared here is a review by an Australian university, Victoria University in Australia, and they've gone big with it. They basically, over the past 4 years, everything is block delivery. All modules are taught in that way. And they present a really interesting, I wonder if you move the slide just one step forward. Yeah. So this graph is from that study and shows you the effects over the 3 years as they've shifted to block delivery. And there's a lot of really interesting things where they look at intersectionality and how block delivery has really supported those learners. So I think there's something in block delivery, but the second one that I've offered up, which is Nixon and O'Gorman from 2020, looks at the problem from the lecturer's point of view of handling block delivery. And there are some good points about this, but there are some complications. For instance, you get a faster sense of accomplishment and insight about what's happening to the students, but there's a little margin for error because you're only delivering in such a short space of time. If you're not sorted and you miss that deadline yourself as a lecturer, it's too late. I've finished my little bit. Sorry to you, Rumini, if I've gone too far, but
no, that's all right.
Sorry.
I wanted you to cover enough as well so that the audience can understand why we are doing this piece of work. Can I have the next slide, please, Emma? No, next one. So quick questions around intersectionality considerations. It's quite a packed slide with text. Are we bothered about intersectionality? Are we bothered about students with care responsibilities? Are we bothered about international students? There is in the Google Doc a timeline which was around, I think, 4 p.m. Roughly, let's say if I'm a mom and I've got care duties, I've got my kids in care center, daycare center, I'll probably have to think, okay, do I go and pick my kids up around 4 or do I leave them in after school? Things like that. And there's a whole list of intersectionality consideration that we can understand. But there's also one thing that we need to think about. What types of assessments are still valid in 21st century, especially now, post-pandemic, and things have moved online? Must all modules have written assignments and exams? I recall when I was doing programming, I used to have to do assignments with pseudocodes. I was like, why am I having to write pseudocodes? I'm never going to, in no job will I be asked to do pseudocodes. What is that? I mean, I've been a software engineer. I've never had to do pseudocodes. I've never had to even remember codes by heart. I knew the ABCs of, I don't know, Python, C, C++, and all these. I knew you had to end with a semicolon where needed and things like this, but I've never had to write pseudocodes. But yet assignments were, please write the pseudocode, and even in exams. And one of the questions I would like everyone to ask is, how much are we bothered, by the way, about assessments, about deadlines, and about intersectionality, and about students, whether we are doing things for the students or all the students, or whether we are actually looking at just a category. So when we say students benefit from it, who is benefiting? And there will be somebody who's not benefiting from it. Are we looking for that somebody who's not benefiting from it? One thing also that doesn't work with the current model of UKHE assessment is for TNE students. Now that, okay, Erasmus Plus has been, Brexit and all, but there's still TNE courses. TNE courses is really horrible. Like when I was in Greece and Spain, yes, it gave me 1 and 2 hours ahead, but it also meant that if I didn't manage my time properly, I was still working till 1 or 2. And if I didn't manage my time properly, it's not because I wanted and I chose to, but because when students move to other countries, there are other things that they've got to deal with. Look for their accommodations. I've had visa issues so many times. There's always something else that you've got to worry around. Are we accommodating for these students? Are we lenient enough? Can I have the next slide, please? I'm aware we probably will not be able to take questions. One thing that Jim also mentioned is, like, for example, block deadlines and things like this. Are there alternatives? Are we having these alternatives? Are we implementing them? Are we talking about them in our institution? And Jim also mentioned already about I've put digital in bracket because not all assignment you need to be working on a computer. You probably are reading a book. Students are reading a book and writing it down, then typing it on Word document or something. It doesn't mean that everything they are researching on online library and stuff like this. So where does well-being stand there in that? And sorry, I should have asked, one slide before. Now, oh yeah, sorry, this one, this very one. This is actually, sorry, the next one. This slide is actually questions that I've already got in the abstract that I will share. I've shared on Twitter. It's basically if we have a 23:59 deadline, what happens at midnight? Does the tutor suddenly wake up and starts marking the assignment? Why at midnight? Why at 23:59? It could have been 5 a.m., 10, 25 a.m. is not right as well because the students have got to sleep. Some of you have written noon, which is a really great deadline because then you also have staff who can help and you're not stressing staff as well. There's so many questions that are out there on the slide. I'll continue the conversation online as well on Twitter. But one exercise for you to take on as a takeaway from this presentation is if you had authority and the finance, because most of the time I hear that people say, I'm not in power, I don't have the finance, there's this and that issue around authority and finance. But if you had authority and finance, I actually have a Padlet link there. If Emma could put that, it's a takeaway exercise that you could fill it in your time. If you had authority and finance, what will you do differently? All the cons that you've added on the Google Doc, how would you then do that differently so that there's no cons and there's no challenges? Well, I believe there will be some point. Some model that you'll implement will have some sort of cons. Maybe you'll have to apply to employ more people. But if you had it all logistically possible, what would you do differently and how would you do it? So this is more of a takeaway kind of exercise for you to, and if I could have the next slide, which is, this was the one I was talking about, and the next one, which is about choice. We have the choice, but are we making the right choice, or is money and our line manager preventing us from making the right choice? I've got the next few slides, which is around references. There's also further reading that Jim has shared in the chat. I'll be sharing these slides online. I'll put it on Discord as well, if you're on Discord, or I'll share it on Twitter as well, and potentially ask Alt if they could tweet it to reach more people as well, more members as well. And before I finish, I'm 3 minutes already past. I'd like to thank Suktinder Kaur, who she hasn't joined us today, but she's been a critical friend at the early stage of our discussion, especially because of our work around intersectionality and what we wanted to look around in intersectionality. This is, I must mention, is a work in progress. Your input around what you've done in the Google Sheet, if you want to kind of fill your row completely, that is most welcome, so I can have your information and we can do further work around that. I don't seem to see question. I know we've overrun. I'm happy to take questions on Twitter. Emma?
I didn't notice any questions either. Lots of cormorant facts and other seabirds. But yeah, if you want to share your Twitter with or even in Discord, if anybody wants to continue the conversation there. But it's been a really, we've lost Jim. It's been a really inspiring conversation and really interesting, and I've been finding myself scribbling down all the references. So I just wanted to say thank you very much, Jim and Tirumani, and hopefully continue the conversation soon.
Thanks, Jim, for the logistical support. Sorry, Emma. And thanks, Jim, of course, for being my co-presenter on this and collaborate on this difficult topic.
Thank you very much, and see you at the next session. Thank you.